Zoom from the synagogues, but the Chabad have services every week and every morning there
Wow.
at the building. It's
I
amazing.
don't know if you read it on social media, but you know, Lakewood is a very Orthodox Chabad community, Haredi, and they
Yeah.
have decided not to do Purim in a celebration in the streets because of COVID, which is really incredible that they made that decision.
It is.
Yeah, they're doing smaller congregational celebrations of Purim. I mean, you know, in Lakewood, Purim is 10,000 people on every street, and they've decided not to do that. So
I'm so happy to hear that, Debbie. I live near Lakewood,
yeah.
and I wasn't here yesterday because my rabbi does lunch and learn on Wednesday, and we were talking about food, and we had a video that we watched, and somebody at the end of the program asked where she could get kippered salmon.
At 2 o'clock when you have the
And the
chorus.
rabbi said, well, there's a place in Lakewood, but you have to promise me you're not going to go there until COVID is over.
Yeah.
No, so I was talking to my daughter this morning about, because she lives in a Haredi
We're streaming.
area, in Israel. And I said, well, what are they doing about Purim? And she said, they're only allowed to have people who have had the vaccine or have had COVID, like have had the COVID to go. So anybody who hasn't isn't allowed.
And you know, in 3 months, we'll
My
find out
daughter
that
lives.
that would-
My daughter's up in Efrat, and they are still on lockdown.
So,
Hey, Sue.
okay, well, we are streaming, as Rabbi said, and I'm going to mute everyone. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon. It's nice to be together. Sorry I popped on late. I was in Israel with a class. It's so funny with the magic of Zoom, how we can just be everywhere, and how both of you just mentioned that you have daughters in Israel and you've been in touch with them. And it's just amazing to me how we can communicate with people all over the world and how every day we get together from different places. So we're going to get right to it. Rabbi, you in the mood to teach?
I'm always in the mood to teach.
Good for you.
Good to see everybody. And the good news is that it's snowing so badly that my roofers couldn't come today. What a shock. They'd probably fall off the roof the way the snow is just rubbing right off the roof. But I have not seen it this bad in a long time. So it was interesting to hear all about Lakewood. It's actually not Chabad. It's very Haredi yeshivish. I know that for a fact because I used to live in Toms River, which is right over the border. And if anyone was on the call for the FJMC, the men's club call about the worldwide wrap with Park Avenue Synagogue, and I told the story about how Cameron couldn't get her tallis bag and her tefillin bag because someone said it wasn't the Lakewood way. It wasn't I reword that. It wasn't the Muncie way. And then I spoke to one of the head rabbis who's in the article on the JTA. I won't mention his name, but I spoke to directly, and he got one of his people to go with me shopping. And he told that store owner, it is the Lakewood way to sell it. And we appreciate everyone. And it's a very interesting community. If anybody ever wants to go in, I could probably give you a little tour. We don't live as close to it anymore, and I haven't been there in a long time. But it is quite interesting. I used to wonder if, when I went to the hospital there, if I was causing any accidents on the road, if people saw me in my car with my kippah on. And actually, my son was born in Lakewood. And I love to tell all of them that it was probably the first rabbi who ever gave birth in a hospital in Lakewood. So it's quite an interesting place. And as Debbie said, I was very happy that they've said to not have gatherings, because that would be a disaster completely. Sorry, I'm going ahead of myself. So yesterday, Gilda, we missed you. I believe it was because of the power outages in Texas. I hope you're better today. So since I needed to think quickly on my feet, I asked Barbara Finkel yesterday to sing in place of you yesterday, Gilda. So if you're on today, which I did see you, if you can unmute yourself so I know you're there. And Gilda, yesterday you were going to sing the Shebarach. So if you could sing it today.
Yes, we were with the power on and off for 4 days. So it's the first time I'm back on the internet.
My God, I think I'd be freezing if
See
I
you.
didn't have electricity because of the heat. Though we do have a fireplace, but I'm glad you're here and I hope you're safe and warm and healthy. So yesterday you were going to be leading us in Mishaberach in memory of your mother whose birthday was this week, and also hoping that your recent second COVID shot protects you. Were you able to get that?
Yay. Yes.
Good. Okay. So thank you for singing Mishaberach for us today, and just do pause between the paragraphs so that we can say the name of our loved ones.
Great. Oops. It went away.
Oh, I'm sorry. I leaned my book on the keyboard. That's what happened. Okay, no more leaning.
Mishaberach Avotenu Mekor habracha Limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Yasha kochech to you. And at this time, we're going to continue with the Psalm for Psalm 81, the Psalm for Thursday. And Sally and Paula, you can decide between yourselves which verses you want.
Sally, you can certainly start.
Sorry. For the leader upon the Gittit, a psalm of Asaph.
Sing with joy to God, our strength. Shout with gladness to the God of Jacob.
Strike up a melody, sound the timbrel. Play sweet tones on harp and lyre.
Sound the shofar on the new moon, and again on the full moon for our festival days.
It is the law for the people of Israel, a statute of the God of Jacob.
God ordained it for Joseph's descendants when he rose against the land of Egypt. I have heard the speech that I had previously ignored.
I removed the burden from their shoulder. Their hands were freed from the load.
When you called out in distress, I rescued you. Unseen, I answered you in thunder. I tested your faith at an oasis in the wilderness. Selah.
Hear this warning, my people Israel, if you would only listen.
There will be no strange God in your midst. You shall not worship an alien God.
I am Adonai, your God, who brought you out of Egypt. Open your mouth wide and I will fill it.
But my people did not listen. Israel would have none of me.
So I let them persist in their stubbornness. I let them follow their own inclinations.
If only my people would listen to me. If only Israel would walk in my ways.
How quickly I would subdue their foes and strike out at their oppressors.
Enemies of Adonai shall be humbled. Their downfall shall be unending.
But you I will feed with the richest of wheat, With honey from a rock, I will satisfy you.
Yasha koach to both of you. And I think we definitely need honey in our lives. I like reading that psalm and reading about the honey at the end. So we're up to the teaching 17 from Rabbi Akiva. And we're reading about Rabbi Akiva today because the reading that we had yesterday, the teaching from 316, was from Rabbi Yishmael, and Rabbi Akiva was his study partner and his colleague. So today we're learning from Rabbi Akiva. Often I try to see why they organize the Mishnayot in a certain way. It could be because they were chavrutas in a way. So today we learn that Rabbi Akiva said, mockery and levity accustom one to impropriety. The tradition is a protective fence around the Torah. Tithes are a protective fence to wealth. Vows are a protective fence for abstinence. And a protective fence for wisdom is silence. So we're talking about, if you have to know the major theme, is a siyag, a fence. And we know that Judaism has many fences and they're created for different ways. Some people like them, some people don't. Some people think that they're impenetrable fences that can't be broken. And some of us break them down to make living within a Torahitic life more meaningful. So I'm first going to break it down by discussing Rabbi Akiva, who's probably one of the most well-known rabbis, and there are lots of great stories about him. So it's good to always review that. He was probably the most famous of the 2nd century sages. He was a dominant figure among the sages this was the latter 1st and 2nd century. He was one of the best known rabbis. And if you want to know his exact dates, they say it was 60 to 135. He was a student of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah. Truly a leading teacher in his generation, but he didn't actually start studying until he was 40. So never say you're too old to start studying Torah. He was a shepherd and he married his wealthy employer's daughter. And he set the foundations for the Mishnah. He's renowned for his halachic and midrashic genius. And one of the best stories, which I can just see like in a movie, I always have a creation of an image in my mind when I study this story in the Babylonian Talmud of Menachot, that records a legend that Moses inquired of God about the significance of each jot and letter in the Torah scroll. So if you've ever read Torah, you see we have crowns, we have dots, etc. So Moses was asking God, why would he have those? So God told Moses that there was a sage that would be born in the future, Akiva ben Yosef, who would be able to derive halachot, laws, from the letters and the markings. So Moses said to God, and it's a great story, I want to be transported into the future so I could hear such a learned sage. So God sat at Moses' side in the back of the room while Akiva was teaching. So just picture this. Akiva's in a study hall and God and Moses are sitting in the back of Akiva's classroom. And Akiva's learning was so intricate and so deep that even Moses couldn't follow what he was saying. And he was teaching what Moses received from God. But it was amazing. Moses was like, I don't understand this what guy is talking about. I'm the one who most Torah Misinai, that was from Moshe, Misinai, couldn't be. So that's the story about Akiva that Moses was transported into Akiva's study hall. Akiva was a supporter of Bar Kokhba who led the Jewish rebellion against Rome. But Akiva still continued teaching Torah, even when the Romans forbade it. He was ultimately arrested, imprisoned, and tortured to death by the Romans, and he died as a martyr in 135. And he's truly the hero, one of the heroes of Rabbinic Judaism. And because of his method of interpretation, said that he could deduce mountains of law from the parts of each letter of the written law. And that's why Moses got to sit in his study hall. So in this, he's teaching us about siyagim. A siyag is a fence. So it's built, why do we build a fence? We build a fence to protect something. So it's interesting that there was a psychological study done, I believe it was in 2015. Yes, from Peter Gray. It's Gray. Peter Gray. It's from a study called Free to Learn, Why Unleashing the Instinct to Play Will Make Our Children Happier, More Self-Reliant, and Better Students for Life. So in his study, he showed that if parents don't set up a fence in the backyard, Children will only play in a small area of the yard, which honestly is counterintuitive to my thinking, but the study said that if you didn't build a fence, they only played in a certain part. But if you built a fence that encompassed the span of the backyard, the children will play in the entire backyard because they felt more protected. And I kind of like that in a way, that if you have a fence, that the children realize that they're protected around it, that that's the purpose of the fence. And the siyagim, the fences that we get in the Torah, protect the soul, that we need to filter out those moments that distract us from the higher spiritual calling. So that's what they're saying, that mockery and levity can lead to inappropriate behavior. So impropriety, the Hebrew is margilin le'erva. So if you remember in the story of the spies, they're called miraglim. So gimel lamed hey, that root means to reveal. So it's going to reveal, and erva is nakedness. So I translated it as impropriety. But that sechok, which is mockery or laughter, and kalut, which is like, kalut rosh is lightheartedness. This is like lightheadedness, can lead to revealing nakedness. So that's what they're trying to avoid. And the fences protect these objects. They protect both the psychological objects and also physical objects and spiritual. So we might look away from sacred objects and protect them. That's really what we're trying to do, protect them. And I read recently, someone wrote that she's been watching The New Black on Highflix. It's called Shababnikim or something like that. It's a translated Hebrew show that's in Israel. And one of the most recent episodes talks about how they don't want to have some of these billboards up because it's distracting them from their study. So that's why we create these fences, to prevent you from distractions. And the Mishnah here is teaching us that certain religious matters require stringencies to keep them from violating. So the Masorah is the oral tradition that's handed down from one generation to the next. And we have to have a fence around it, they're saying, to preserve it so we still have the original correct text. And what about tithing? Tithings are protective to the wealth because the tithing will make you realize, you know what and it's giving a tenth to the temple. What I have isn't because of me, it's because what God has given to me. It shows appreciation for what you have because of God. So in Deuteronomy, this is one of the Torah readings that we read on the Shalosh Regalim, on the holidays we go to the temple for sacrifices, Sukkot, Shavuot, Pesach. Parts of it, we read Aser ta'aser in Deuteronomy. You are to give tithes. So in the Babylonian Talmud, in the Tractate Tanit, it says, Aser bishvil shetita aser. So you give tithes, the aser, so that you will become wealthy. So it almost is a cycle. You give away some of your wealth as a donation and you'll become even more wealthy. And it's the same root, ayin shin resh for tithe and ayin shin resh for wealth. So by putting this fence around the tithes, making sure that you don't spend everything you have yourself, that you give it to a donation, it will help you become more wealthy. Vows are a protective fence for abstinence. So your vows protect you from sinning. It causes some self-control. And many of us know that a protective fence for wisdom is silence. That sometimes useless chatter is just too much. That careful observation and listening is needed. Of course, speaking is necessary, but in moderation. It's a way to avoid being drawn into sin by talking too much. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 28 teaches that even a fool, when one holds one's peace, is counted wise. So sometimes not everything needs to be said. And they're teaching us here that a way to avoid sin and controversy is to say silence. It could be also that speaking too much distracts you from the pursuit of Torah, but to also make sure that all of your words are meaningful and necessary and have a purpose in what you're saying. So all of these fences can be put on by other people, but you also have to put it upon yourself to think about what this is going to be. It takes internal courage to think, should I say what I want to or not say what I want to? That it's going both inward and outward. You might think that a fence is an outward object, but these are actually fences to be inward, to think about yourself and to find balance within those outward fences and inward fences to protect our souls during our limited time on earth. So think about now of how many of us are not living outside of our homes at all. We're centered in our homes constantly. And you're at 24 and with the emails and phones, we're in constant contact. Like literally they came up with a good name for that because it's a way for people to communicate. And these days of that we're always home, it's hard to have boundaries. I think about when my children tell me about their teacher who teaches from her bedroom, or that this one has cats all over the place, or they've seen their children and their dogs and their cats. And there used to be boundaries that you didn't know what people's homes look like. And now we're in each other's homes all the time, which could be a good thing, or it could be a bad thing. I don't know if you guys have ever had the experience of being on a Zoom call where someone else who lives in the house walks out, clearly just coming out of the shower. Ruth Shapiro's on my screen, and Fran, I could see you laughing. I've seen it a few times. Like, people realize that. So their boundaries and their fences have changed nowadays. There was a situation in one of the high schools in the area where we used to live, where somebody had one of the students had a political poster behind him in class, and the teacher asked him to take it down. That's a little bit of going into people's boundaries. So what fences and boundaries do you think you create or you don't want to create? Right. Julia wrote that fences provide freedom within limits. And often, why do we personally create these boundaries, especially, for example, the boundaries for vows? The boundaries for a vow was created to prevent you from sinning. It's something that you create to protect yourself, both physically and to protect your soul. So what do you do to protect your soul today? To protect yourself, to not be over Zoomed or over called or over emailed? Or I'll even say that if you wanted to, you could be on a Zoom service for Shabbat all day long. If you wanted to, you could do that in many different communities. And that's not always good either. Moderation. Toby, you're moving your hands, but I'm not sure if it's because you want to talk or not. Holtzman. No? Okay. And if someone does want to speak, you can just unmute yourself because I don't see everybody. Debbie Lampart.
I'm glad that we're discussing these things because if you just read it as is written, I have a lot of problem with a lot of what it says, especially the last one about wisdom is silence. I think about the Holocaust. Wisdom was not silence. So unless you really understand why this is being said and the perspective of the person who's saying it and elaborating on it, it could look a lot of these teachings could feel very offensive. So I'm glad that I'm studying it with you where it's being explained and not trying to study it on my own, where I probably would stop because I'd be upset.
Yes, I didn't write it down and I obviously forgot, but I was thinking that silence isn't always so good, because often silence is agreement. And if you're silent to a misdeed that's going on or around you, then it's not good to be quiet. So I think it's to know when to speak up and when not to speak up, or not to speak too much. But definitely speaking one's mind and realizing that there are different truths. We've often seen that in the world, and knowing that we all have different expertise. And yeah, it's really important not to just sit back and let things happen, which is fascinating for anybody who read the social justice part about the book today. He didn't really talk about the importance of speaking up, doing social justice. I may have to reread it again to see that.
The rabbi is
Audrey.
where the expression silence is golden comes from, do you think?
It probably is one of the ways that it does come from that. But I think that we have to put like a asterisk that silence isn't always golden when it's necessary to
That's
speak
true.
up. Yeah, I like that.
But sometimes, I mean, there are a lot of things that come from expressions that we use today. You think of, you know, don't open your mouth and prove you're foolish. You know, either if you have something to say it, but if you don't say anything, don't open your mouth to reveal your
Right.
inadequacies. I thought about the yard, and I thought, you know, if there's no fence, you stay very close because that's the only way you can feel protected. But if you have a fence, you know this whole area is okay, and you can wander within it without, you know, fear of what's outside of there. And the vow, I was thinking of when they talk about, it's not so much of a vow, but just say no, kind of that whole thing with drugs. And that if you promised your mother that you wouldn't, you could say, my mother wouldn't allow me, as opposed to, I don't want to do it, which gives you a little bit of a cushion to be able to say no, because you're following somebody, a vow that you made to someone else.
So it's almost as you're saying in a way that your mother is the higher authority, is giving you a stamp
Right.
of approval to not do something.
Right. And you
Julia?
can use it as a backup. You know?
Right.
Also, because I read a lot about this study when I was teaching parenting, but the thing is that fences protect you inside, but they don't always keep things from outside getting in, because people could throw things over the fence. So just because you have that limit, you can go out and you can see billboards and you can see things in public, and you know, you can have access to a smartphone even though you don't actually have one yourself. You can borrow somebody. So all of these things, so you have to have your internal fences too, not just the kind of literal fences that get put up.
So important. And I think that because so many fences are put up in some communities, that rebellion begins when they have the opportunity, and then they go a little overboard at times. Marlene?
I guess going back to the silence, I definitely agree with what Debbie said. You know, in the 80s in New York during the AIDS crisis, it was silence equals death. Same thing with the Holocaust. You can't be silent if you have the wisdom. So I would qualify that by saying selective silence. And the whole thing here about boundaries. I mean, if you don't have a tithing going on and you have all this wealth, you're not focusing on what's important. I mean, giving back, or in terms of it's kind of a directed. It's a fence for you to remember that kind of contained. Like, it needs to go someplace good. You don't just have wealth and money and stuff for the sake of having it, but it needs to kind of be directed. And Julia's point is really well taken. You know, some people say, fence, are you keeping something in, or are you keeping something out? And is it symbolic? You know, is it a metaphor? But yeah, I'm glad you're teaching it today. So thank you.
Thank you. Susan?
I had the thought about the silence and wisdom. My impression was more, if you're silent, you have better chance at acquiring wisdom because you're listening instead of talking. So that was the perspective I had on that. And from what you were saying about you could be in shul all day Saturday, I get all these emails from these shuls in California, because at the beginning of the pandemic, the rabbi sent us this whole list of places, and I really could literally go to like 3 Shabbat services all day long, but I don't, because I'm full from the one I attend at our shul in the morning. And I figure then I go and I read and I study some more other things to kind of supplement what I did in the morning, rather than cluttering myself with all the other. But I do go to some of their programs and they're wonderful. So it's great to have that opportunity, but I think the setting our own limits so we don't overwhelm ourselves is important too.
Very true. I think I'm going to wrap up with that comment. Thank you, Susan. And it is a great service that I'm often on, since that's where we pay our dues. And I think the Mishnah is really teaching us the importance of moderation. That in the beginning, it talks about levity. And of course, we're in the month of levity. Misha nichnas Adar marbim v'simcha. Those who enter the month of Adar, our joy is increased. Purim is the holiday of joy, but you can't go overboard. You have to have moderation. We can't never speak. We have to have moderation. And I think what Susan said is one of my favorite things to say, that God gave us 2 ears to listen and only 1 mouth to talk. So we should be doing more listening than talking. So there's always something to learn in our Pirkei Avot to bring to our lives today, and even to bring it to our immediate life today, that in a week, yep, it's a week, it'll be Purim. So it's our holiday of joy, but be careful, especially if the roads look like what they are today in New Jersey. Don't go out, of course. So Karen Weiner has been reading our names this week, and sometimes, and I remember as a pulpit rabbi, there would be periods of time that we had a lot of funerals at one time, often because of just the weather. And it seems like this month we have many yortzites, also because it's Adar, and some people, their deaths were in Adar Aleph or Adar Bet. We only went Adar this year, but there are a lot of yortzites. So may all of our loved ones' memories be a blessing. And Karen, it's all yours.
Thank you, Rabbi. We lovingly remember Evelyn Seelig, Sue Press, Leona Elligberg, Dolores Megan, Phyllis Haas, Ivan Stanton, Sylvia Kraus, Hope Dellon, Herb Lubars, Hannah Bat-Shimon Bacarline, Ellen Babbitt, Theodore Fishman, Richard Merrick, Lillian Tobias, Doris Hildebrand, Ruth Lewis Bloomfield, Michael Klingbaum, Michael Schrank, Shirley Shapiro, Carol Hope Taub, David Levy, Ernestine Loeb Hamill Erkin, Shelley Bearer, Miriam Clow, Effie Pollock, Ernie Levinson, Marla Goldberg, Barbara Roth Roberts, Phyllis Grusin Weinstein, Saul Fishman, Davida Shipkowitz, Herb Shapiro, Ike Cohen, Rabbi Stephen Lerner, Rabbi Eric Wilner, Jace Diaz, Yossi Goldstein, Isidore Goldberg, Jacob Grossman, Annette Ross, and the Yortzites of Sam Shmuel and Sarah Levy. Are there any others?
And Yartzeit for Gladys Bruce, Debbie Bruce's mother.
Lorraine Allen, my sister.
And Marlene, you had
Charles Lenschitz, my father-in-law.
And also we add Gloria Silverstein for the week. I'm just looking to see if we said Sam Shmuel. Okay.
I did, yeah.
And Sarah Levy, you said. Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure. Sometimes people put it on, and if the person reading the list hasn't come on yet, they don't get the previous names.
May all their memories be for a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And today we have Dina Gordon, who will be leading us in the recitation of the mourner's Kaddish in memory of Sam Shmuel, whose first Yortzeit is marked today. So if you will be reciting Kaddish, please rise and unmute yourself. And Dina, I'll try to go along with my hearing of you saying it so I can point to the words.
Yes, Yes, Kaddish, Shmei, Rabba, Semo, Dibaro, Chaim Letz, Chaim,
Yomechon,
Yomechon,
Beit Israel, Agalah, Zman,
Bagalah, Zman, Ari, Amru, Amen,
Yeheshmei, Rabba,
Barach, Olam, Me'omai, Yisbarach, Yishar, Yisman, Yitalah, Shemei, Beyisadar, Yisalev v'Yisalev me Kodashav Richu
Ela,
Ulela min
Ta,
Kober
Shivata,
Asa Eshi
Kata,
Rasa
Menakamata,
Tush Asa
Randiama,
Benehemata Ami Ran Be'amal Meru Amen
Hey,
Hey
Lama,
Shlomo Rabba Ben
Shemaya,
Shemaya
Yakayim
Yakayim
Aleinu,
Aleinu Kol
Kol
Yisrael
Yisrael,
Imru
Amen.
Amen Osei
Osef,
Shalom
Shalom, Shalom,
Hamav
Ya'aseh
Ya'aseh
Shalom,
Shalom
V'Yal Kol
Binu
Yisrael,
Yisrael Bimru Amen.
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 Yes, shalom.
Who's it?
Amen.
Amen. Dina, yasher koach to you, and thank you for leading us today in the Mourner's Kaddish. I just want to mute everybody so Debbie will have your attention when she speaks, and wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. And Debbie, all yours.
Thank you, Rabbi. So, wow, we had a lot of people who had your site today for some very special people, and you know, we're glad that we're here for you in this holy community, so that you could recite Mourner's Kaddish with us, and that we could be with you at this time. So, because I want to be clear, Rabbi and I were just texting about the Lakewood community, and I wanted to clarify that it was actually the yeshiva and the rabbinical